Well, let's try that again. I've got to warm up the group for Sanjay. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Very good. This is a very, very interactive forum, and it is our third time, so we're probably out of beta. All right? But what we're trying to do is we try to bring together.
I think Windows calls that 1.0.
That's true. All right? What we try to do is try to bring together courageous leaders, visionaries, people who basically innovate. And innovate is a very difficult verb. It's a very interesting verb. It's a very important verb. And it's also a very omnipresent verb. At the Olin Innovation Lab 1, many of you were here, all right, because this is a longitudinal community. You may remember that one of the things we do, we juxtapose faculty, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, public sector, private sector, and CIOs and the C-suite. We brought them together. And students, our future. And it was fascinating because the students at that particular moment told some of the largest organizations in America that why would they ever contemplate working for a company as large, as slow, and as soon to die as yours, you know? And the individual, this was not this level, no. So the person who was being interrogated basically said like, but wait, what do you mean? He says, I have an interesting job. And the pushback from the student was, you are a button-pushing drone. I hope you remember that. All right? So what we're trying to do is bring these groups together. But one of the great success stories, the great untold success stories in innovation is some of the amazing things going on at OnStar. And as you know, all great stories have an interesting human element. And we're very, very fortunate to have the person who lived that dream, who fought that fight, and who lived to tell the tale. All right? So ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for a hero of innovation, somebody who's in the bowels of the largest organization that subsequently went bankrupt, but is now back and better than ever. All right? But ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Sanjay Kungar.
Thanks, Gordon. I may not survive for too long, of course. You know, I have survived up till now, so maybe not for too long after this, so who knows. But, thank you for the introduction, and you're always very kind. And I think one of these days I need to have you come in and say the same thing to my boss, so he'll maybe, we'll get something done anyway. So we still continue to go for change, and we're trying. So, hopefully we will be able to make more change happen, and I think there's a lot more opportunity out there. A couple of things. I just wanted to do a quick poll. I think I've talked to a few people, so that there may be a biased poll here. How many have heard of OnStar? Okay, that's pretty good. There's still people who haven't heard, so that's always interesting. And how many of you guys have used OnStar? Much smaller group. We need to change that. Well, we'll talk about that. So maybe I'll have one of the communications PR videos, so get everybody up to speed on what OnStar is and does. One quick question. How many do you feel that you're comfortable with knowing in the services of OnStar, especially the ones who have heard of OnStar? Do you know what OnStar does? Comfortable with that? Good, because what I like to do is after I've gone through it, I like to understand, did I provide some new information, something that was revelation that you didn't know about? So that'll be an interesting conversation I'd like to have. Now, I will probably have to go back and forth. My laptop is up there, and I think I'll have to operate at least a couple of, I have a video, so I'll start with that, and then I think hopefully I'll be able to just run everything from there. So we'll see. This is an introduction video that I typically...
OnStar Center, this is Louise here. How may I help you?
Yes, I want to report a stolen car.
I'll be able to assist you.
I did it again!
You lost the keys in the car?
Yes, I did!
We're broadcasting from the OnStar Command Center, the 24/7 Nerve Center in the OnStar headquarters.
OnStar.
OnStar. Wow, cool. Well, at least if it has GM OnStar.
We had 3 vehicles stolen last night.
State police have it, and we'll have the fire department responding too.
OnStar! Don't mess with OnStar.
OnStar emergency. The car in front of me just drove off the road, went into Lake Michigan.
You know, there should be an OnStar overlooking all of us.
We're right.
I love my OnStar.
How do I love my OnStar? Let me count the way.
Now, I like this video just because it provides a very good overview. This is actually an old video, and as you'll see, some of the things that have changed in the last month or so. Our logo has changed a little bit. A few other things are changing, and we'll talk about that. And a lot of it is just basically in response to changing times, changing pressures, There's lots of forces of change that I'll touch on. I guess that's kind of where an overview of what all services we have. So one quick question. Any idea, any guesses as to how long OnStar has been around? 10 years? 10, 15, 20? Any other thoughts? Perfect answer. It's exactly 15, actually, almost exactly 15, September, 15 years back. What's interesting is I've been with OnStar for now 9 years, just finished 9 years. And I've seen the growth of OnStar, then all the changes, issues that happened with General Motors, and as you know, as Thornton eloquently put it, you know, we survived that portion of the downturn and all the challenges that came with it, and here we are. And there's a new chapter coming. There's a whole new chapter of OnStar and telematics and connected vehicles and connectivity that's coming in response to a whole lot of stuff that's going on. I think all of us, as we start talking about mobility over the next day or two, today and tomorrow, we'll talk more about a lot of the stuff that's driving, and one of those things that's changing is OnStar over time. Very quickly, OnStar was founded in June of 1995. The mission when we started was really to provide unique safety, security, and peace of mind for drivers and passengers. So the point was, it was in-vehicle safety and security. We wanted to make sure that the people inside the vehicle were safe. Interesting enough, over time, that changed. The mission changed, that we started looking at not just safety and security of the occupants in the vehicle, but also people who are outside the vehicle. And that's where some of the stolen vehicle services came along, and largely in response to all the questions and points we got from everybody, from all of us, from all of you. We launched the service in 1996 on Cadillacs. Our first customer was in September of 1996. Quick also point there, the founding was actually, there was a consortium. It was actually 3 companies that came together and founded OnStar. It was General Motors, Hughes, and EDS. So all 3 companies brought in their components, if you want to call it, into that mix. So there was the product, the vehicle side came with General Motors. Hughes brought in the connectivity, the satellite communication know-how, and EDS brought in the technical IT know-how. So all 3 components were put together to create at that time the Project Beacon, which was in '95, which eventually became OnStar. And it really was initiated by the highest level in General Motors. So we talk about the fact that GM is where, oftentimes I hear about it at least, that there was no innovation or there is no innovation. If you look at the history of a lot of the companies, they actually did have a lot of these items, especially as I look at GM, you know, they were a lot more ahead of their time than at least I gave them credit when I started looking at OnStar. And then over time I realized how much forward-looking some of the folks were and still are out there. So it's been an eye-opening for me. We are on the 8th generation of the OnStar in-vehicle hardware. We are in the process of launching the 9th generation, and we'll touch on that a little bit. Last year, we launched OnStar in China, so Shanghai OnStar, which actually is growing faster than the US, the North American OnStar has ever been. It is doing really well, and that's going on right now. We are certainly looking at other parts of the world also as time goes by.
You're on 8th generation. How do you determine I know at Microsoft, a non-sponsor, you know, that other program, right? You know, it's when people get so pissed off with the other one, you have the license. You know? And they're only in Windows 7, and you guys are at like 8. But I'm just wondering, when do you create? When does Generation 9? When do you build that?
When we talk about the gen of the hardware, it really is the in-vehicle hardware. And what drives us is typically new features. And what most of us don't realize is that with every model year, with every even vehicle line changes, the software and or hardware of the various modules do change. The challenge with OnStar is that we are actually taking what would be rightly called the consumer electronics components and consumer electronics technology and putting it in a vehicle. And that's been a big challenge of ours. Most of our consumer electronic components, I mean, if you look at any cell phones, any iPads or whatever we're going to call it, and most of the consumer electronics have a life of anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. But if you tell anybody here, including me, that your car has a life of only 2 years, it'll probably have a, will be very unhappy. And the point there is that vehicles have a life of 10 to 15 years. So we have to kind of fit that, where we are taking a product which has the technology, which has a life of about 2 years, in a product which has a life of 10 to 15 years, and make it happen. So that's one of the reasons why there's been more churn, if you want to call it, in the modules. But having worked that challenge out, the next thing I think we are starting to look at now is how do we really make it happen where there's one unit in the vehicle, but we can still update the technology. That goes back to your comment about Microsoft, and that's what Microsoft has been working on too, right? They can reflash or change the software and get updates out. So that's some of the challenges that we've been having. Now, as far as how do we really figure out when is it time for our next generation, mostly features. So when we have to add more features, when we have to add more memory capacity, whatever else that we need to add. The only one which I remember where we had to make a change because of very specific technology was Gen 6. 6th generation of our hardware was the only time that I know of where we changed it because of the fact that the wireless communication changed from analog to digital. So when the analog cell phones, if you want to call it, analog communication died, we had to, in response, change and go to digital. And we actually had a lot of unhappy customers because there were some vehicles we could not upgrade to the digital technology. So that's pretty much the driver that we have. But what we are really working on is having one generation and then be able to just get new software up. That's kind of the goal going forward. Okay, let's see if this works. This does work. So OnStar today. This is just the key services out there. The automatic crash response is probably our flagship service. That's the service where if there is a crash, the vehicle detects that and automatically calls the call center. Emergency services that go hand in hand, that's really a button press. That if there is an emergency in the vehicle, you can press that button, that cross button. Good Samaritan. And there's an interesting story on the Good Samaritan service. That service was one of the first service, I believe, that we offered in response to people asking for it. What used to happen was an OnStar, a vehicle equipped with OnStar, the driver would be going by and would see a crash, would see an incident, would see a problem on the vehicle, and they would press a button. So as we thought about that, and that's where I mentioned, as over time we matured from the safety and security of the occupants of the vehicle to really safety and security of everybody around and in the vehicle. So that was one of the first services where we felt that there was a need for a service where it was okay for any OnStar subscriber to really press a button and say somebody else outside needs help. So that's what became the Good Samaritan service where, and as you can see, we have up till now received 469,000 calls in US and Canada on that. By the way, these are US and Canada numbers only. I don't have numbers in here for China, and those numbers are growing really fast there. Stolen vehicle assistance is another one. If your vehicle is stolen, OnStar can help, and I sound like an ad. Remote door unlock, same thing. If you get locked out, you can get the door unlocked with basically calling in to the OnStar advisor, and they can over the air unlock the door. Roadside assistance, if you get in trouble on the road. Turn by Turn is a newer service we have. That's a navigation service that was rolled out fairly recently, and Vehicle Diagnostics, which goes hand in hand with on-request diagnostics. So if you get a light suddenly turned on in the vehicle while you're driving, you can press the button and have the agent, the advisor we call them, do a diagnostic over the air and point out if there is a problem with the vehicle or not.
So Sanjay, just in that space, I mean, how far has OnStar taken a service like that? So in that instance, I could see a situation, my wife's driving down the road, the red light comes on, she presses the button, we go through it, okay, you need to have XYZ done.
Right.
Oh, by the way, 3 miles from you is a GM dealer
right.
who can do this, and they have an opening at 3 o'clock.
We can.
So have you taken it from just beyond the vehicle-centric, in the vehicle and vehicle proximity kinds of services to also now driving business to your business partners like the dealer network?
Yes, we do that. We absolutely do that. You can actually make an appointment that we can integrate. We're not probably, I'd say we're not as well integrated with all the dealer systems. It's really nice over time that it can all be pushed over to the dealer so dealer knows you're coming. And why I see us going back to some of the innovation that I like to see, is that when I drive in, like in your situation, let's say your wife had problem, when she drives into the dealer bay, the dealer knows exactly who it is, what the problem is, everything is linked up, and up comes the issue, and then you could be able to just get the service right there.
Yeah, so to follow up on that, another idea, Thornton, I was thinking about the guy from Kroger when we were down in Jacksonville. I mean, Kroger's doing some amazing stuff in terms of understanding their customer base. They're a grocery store based out of the Cincinnati area, and it just strikes me that there is a tremendous potential here for taking what we know about the customer, who's in the car, and where the car is, and frankly, where they're headed, if you knew the turn-by-turn directions. Well, you wouldn't know that for the grocery store, I suppose. But to say, hey, by the way, your highly valued customer is headed your way, Kroger. Make sure you've got the right flavor of whatever out on the shelf.
Great idea. Hold that for 2 years. I think we'll probably get it in.
So you're talking about Google with wheels. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Google on wheels, yep. That's an interesting ad. Google on wheels.
Mobile Google.
Yeah. Hands-free calling, we've been providing that for quite a while. I think we have it now for, I believe, for 10 years. And then, as we'll talk about, what's the next generation of services that are coming, potentially hands-free texting or things like that. And then, of course, the total number of services and interactions that we have.
Randy, I thought there was a service that you provided that dealt with making reservations for restaurants and things like that as well.
Interesting. Yes, we used to have that. At one time, we actually had what we call the safety and security package, the directions and connections package, and what we call the concierge service. Yeah. We didn't have enough pull for that. Not enough people were interested in that. So eventually, we kind of dropped it. So I think the advisors will still do it, but because there's no pull, we don't really advertise. We don't really offer that as a service per se.
Right.
Yeah.
When you kicked this off, you had said that the objective was to increase the security and safety of GM customers. Is that still the primary objective? Is it the only objective, or is there an objective around getting more people to see this as a way of differentiating GM products, or is there an objective around maximizing the profit that comes from the service, or has that changed, and how do you see that today?
Well, the second one you mentioned, to maximize the profit, I think that has to happen for any company to survive. So certainly that is kind of the financial objective, you can call it. But really our mission has been around safety and security. And similarly, the objective of driving sales from a vehicle perspective, that is more of a secondary objective. So if you take a look at the list of objectives that we have, the primary objective continues to be the safety and security and peace of mind. And then secondary objective is to drive sales for the vehicles. And then along with that, there are some internal objectives too. For example, we can actually, with diagnostics, we didn't talk about that, with diagnostics, we can actually improve safety, improve the recalls. So because we can actually do some diagnostics over the air and find out where the issues are. So as a result, we can do a lot of quality activities, and with that, we've been able to improve some of the recall, and basically the quality metrics have been impacted. So those are all internal objectives. But from a primary objectives, how we got started, and that safety, security, peace of mind continues to be the primary one. Yes.
Have they considered spinning it off and selling it to as a service to other companies, other car manufacturers?
The OnStar service? When I first started, OnStar was actually offered on pretty much everybody except for Ford and Chrysler. The Lexus at that time had OnStar. Lexus Link actually used to be OnStar. The Audis had OnStar. Volkswagen had OnStar. Subaru had OnStar. So pretty much everybody other than Ford and Chrysler had OnStar. Honda, Audi had. But over time, for various reasons, some of it because that was considered closer to GM. Another reason probably was the fact that everybody, the other manufacturers wanted their own service. So I think over time that has happened, that it just has not gone the same way. We do not say that, we don't exclude any other manufacturers. Certainly any other manufacturer is more than welcome to get the service, so GM does not exclude that. By the way, I didn't mention that OnStar is a wholly owned subsidiary of GM, so as a separate company, a separate entity, we can have other customers, and we do oftentimes, yeah. Oops, I'm going backwards. Another interesting thing, just wanted to do a quick, this is, I'm assuming it's an IT group because I saw it's more IT discussions here. So I did want to kind of point out where and how the OnStar service works. There's a huge IT involved here. And when I say IT, the IT systems that we have, even though it's within the umbrella of the information technology team, it really is, to me, a product offering. So the technology that we used for traditional IT systems, the IS systems, information systems, is the one that we use to provide a lot of the service. So in a nutshell, in the vehicle, there's a unit. We touched on that. There's a 3-button assembly, and we try to keep it very simple, all voice operated. There's a vehicle communication integration along with that, external GPS. It works with cellular antenna. All communication to the external entity, the back-end systems, the atoms and call centers and all, happens through cellular communication. There's an in-vehicle sound system integration. Of course, there's a microphone, so everything else that is voice operated. There is rudimentary displays, but we try to keep it minimum just because we don't want driver distraction. So most of the interaction happens through voice. On the back end then is the system that takes the call, provides the service, the application that is used by the advisors to provide the service, does all the voice, text-to-speech, and speech recognition. All of that is on the back end. And that is where, I've called out some of the stats there, 56 systems, about 600 servers we have. It is a 7x30, 24x365 operations. We have, at this point, about 5.6 million subscribers. We get about 9 million calls per month. The database sizes are pretty large. They are not huge, but they're certainly pretty large because we collect a lot of data with all the interactions that we get. So there are about 90 million database transactions per day that do happen. The reason I want to go through is because I have been oftentimes asked as to how do we use the satellite communication. We actually do not use satellite communication, as you see. We actually use wireless communication. Now, not that we cannot, but just over time, just the way it happened, we put together wireless communication, cellular network with the GPS, and then use that as the wireless communication as a way to communicate back to our systems. Yes, that does mean that you need to be in an area that is cellular, where cellular communication does occur, which nowadays is pretty high. I mean, if you look at the coverage area, we are, I think, in the high 90 from a POPs population coverage perspective.
I had another question, but this probably answers that anyway. There's a big market and a lot of these personal emergency response devices, you know, for people in boating and hiking and so on, and is that the reason why you haven't entered that business? That you require cellular network, or have you considered to enter that business?
We always consider expansions, but again, the bulk of the focus right now has been vehicles. Now, over time, I would expect things will change again. We'll talk about some of the changes that are coming down the pike. So there could be PERS entry, there could be other integration that can occur. But certainly, right now, we are in the vehicle side, so then the focus has always been vehicle. And there's enough to do there.
You have a response infrastructure.
Right. Yeah, the hiking and all has been more interesting because where most of the times I think people are hiking does not have cellular coverage. And I've had situations where I go actually once a year we go to Colorado, and up on one of the mountains we go where we stay that does not have cellular coverage. And once we got there, I pressed the button to make sure to double check if that didn't have OnStar coverage either, and it did not. And the reason I did that was because the antenna, the OnStar antenna, is much bigger. It has more power. So even though there might not be cellular coverage from a cell phone, you still might have coverage from OnStar. So that's why actually you have better coverage with OnStar because of the fact that it's a high-powered antenna. No antenna on the vehicle. So it is emitting. It's a higher power and also has it's emitting. It's right on top. So as a result, it has greater vision field of vision. Okay, where's my next? Okay, I tend to go backwards. It's not working. We'll try. Okay, just wanted to very quickly. I won't go through all the details, but it's worth noting the vehicle telematics ecosystem. It's interesting because when we started, actually, our president made that comment once, the previous president actually now. He said that when we started, when the three companies came together, the feeling was how difficult it would be, right? Vehicles have communication capability. It goes over wireless. There's an IT system. You put it all together. As simple as that. And when they started that, actually putting it together, they realized all these things that had to be done. There's the consumer, as I mentioned, the consumer electronics integration. There is the regulatory compliance issues that come in. PSAP relationship, the relationship with all the service providers, all the emergency service providers. How do you really get calls to them? I don't know how many people know that, but there is no central E911 or 911 system in the United States. All 911 systems are actually local. So when a call comes into one center, how do you turn around and call the right place? Because it's not a 911 call anymore. It's not localized. So knowing all of that and having a database, a way to call, and having the direct relationship with each one of those safety providers, the emergency providers, is an important thing. And that had to be worked out. There's a whole lot of other things that I don't want to touch on every one of those, but certainly very quickly it came to their, they figured out that this was more complex than they originally thought it was. And this is just a small set. There's a whole other set of people and companies and partners that we've had to work with to make sure that this service comes up. Did I have a question? Okay, now I think I'll get the right way. No? Okay. I'm not going to go in too much detail on every one of the services because it doesn't make sense, but I did want to talk about a couple of them because those to me have been game changers. And then we can talk about what's some of the new thinking that's coming up. And then after that, I really would like your help in figuring out, what is it that we should be working on. That's really where I need your help. But effectively, one of the service that we have is the automatic crash response system. And that's the one where there are lots of sensors in the vehicle. If there is a front sensor that's triggered or a side sensor that's triggered or any other sensor that's triggered, all that information goes to a sensing diagnostic module, and then that information gets sent out to the back office. So the idea there is that if there is any crash of any kind that occurs, any accident, any rollover, any triggering of airbag, that would the vehicle automatically turns around and makes a call to the advisors in the call center. And the advisors then have all that information, number of occupants who are there. They have the information around whether it was a rollover, and with all that information, they can then provide to the 911 dispatcher so they can then determine the right emergency response to provide. Because what we found is that oftentimes, all the 911 knows is there's a crash. They don't know how severe the crash was. So there is a whole lot of work that has gone on. We're working with the CDC on what we call the severity algorithms, so we can actually figure out what is the severity of that crash, and as a result, provide that information to the emergency responder team so they can appropriately come with the resources to be able to address the issue at that time. Earlier, during the conversations, we're having that conversation that as the video is coming in, as there are more and more cameras that are coming into the vehicle, there is talk about potentially being able to trigger that camera automatically and look in the vehicle and see what's really going on in the vehicle in the case of in the situation of a crash. Now those are some of the improvements, and over time, some of the things that we can do as the technology changes and some of the features and functionality changes. Another one, a service that I'm quite proud of, and I know it's got a lot of, OnStar got quite a lot of flack from a lot of people, is the stolen vehicle services. In a typical situation, what we do provide is a location service. So if there is a vehicle that's been stolen and that there is a report that's given to the police, the police can work with OnStar to actually find the vehicle. So that is just a location service. In addition to that, in the last 2 years, we launched what we call the stolen vehicle slowdown and remote ignition block service. A couple of stats up there. There are about 1 million stolen vehicles annually that lead to 30,000 high-speed chases. Last year, I think I have the stats here. The last year, we had 334 people who were killed in high-speed chases. 5 of them were police officers. 235 people were in the chased vehicles, and then 77 of those were bystanders. So you can imagine the chases themselves contribute to so many issues and deaths, and this is just the deaths. I don't even have the numbers off the top of my head as to the number of injuries. 25% of those 30,000 high-speed chases do result in injuries, often bystanders. And as I mentioned, 300 plus deaths. So what we started was the stolen vehicle slowdown service, and was literally in response to the law enforcement agency we were working with. They wanted this service, so that came up. And effectively what happens is when the vehicle is reported stolen, we can turn off the ignition. So turn off the ignition in this situation, turn off the acceleration in the first situation. So as a result, the vehicle cannot be driven past that point once it's been turned off.
So OnStar slows down the vehicle, and Toyota speeds up the vehicle.
I will not make any comments on that. I don't think Toyota wanted to do it.
No, I got to believe that this service would also be remembering my Thornton manners here. I have to believe that these services would also be popular with fleet vehicles as well. I'm just thinking of food transportation services in case we actually had to go do this. We have some delivery vehicles ourselves, which we ended up having to go find an aftermarket where we could shut the vehicle down if the driver is in one spot. Frankly, if the driver got too far from the vehicle, you would shut the vehicle down.
Right.
Just because we didn't want it going anywhere.
Yeah, actually there is a big market in fleet. There's a big market even nowadays in other, and when I say market, all the services that we talk about, all the telematics services, in lots of other places. For example, FedEx and all would require something like this, the navigation, and be able to do routing, and also along with that the other thing. The thing that has happened is that we concentrate more on the consumer side, and as a result, there are fleet solutions which are different.
Right.
So there's no one solution that's available for fleet as well as for consumer side. So that's been the history of this for telematics. You're right. There is a market there. The other one is the vehicle diagnostics. We touched on that earlier. In conjunction with the remote diagnostic that can be done on request, there is also a diagnostics email that can be received with all that information, and we don't need to go through all that. But effectively, the point is that when an email comes up, you get an option of looking at what the current status is. There's some highlights, tire pressure is low. Schedule some maintenance. There's dealer information there. You can click from there, go directly to the dealer website and do all of that, and a whole lot of other things that can be done. Actually, this is an old, I think, email. More things have been added since. This is changing a lot with the Vault, because with the electric vehicles coming, the kind of information you can get from them is just amazing, because everything is literally electronic on them. So the email that will come with the Vault is going to look very different. I think this is the last detailed service discussion that I have, which is the connected navigation, basically the turn-by-turn navigation service that was launched in 2006 and then extended with the eNav capability in 2008, and then this year we've extended it. The point there again is everything is voice operated. We all have experience with GPS and our portable navigation device, personal navigation, or portable navigation devices, the PNDs, and most of them require a lot of things to be done, whether it's the onboard navigation or the PNDs. What we were looking to do was have a low price point so that the service is available on every vehicle that has OnStar. Plus, at the same time, make it safe so you can press the button, give the advisor the information that needs to be as to what the destination is, get your route downloaded, and then from that point onwards, it becomes turn by turn. As you're taking turns, it'll give you directions as to where to turn along the way, just like any other navigation device. But there is an option, and most of them, I think vehicles do have that, right on the driver information console. You do get very minimal information, next turn coming, how many miles. Again, the idea there is reduced driver distraction. Gosh, I'll figure it out one of these days. Technology evolution. This is, Gordon probably touches on your question earlier, how we go about, as more and more services need to be added and more features need to be added, that some of the situations might require us to change the hardware. So this shows from generation 1 through Gen 6, 5, 6, all the way to Gen 9 is some of the services that are planned, some of the core services in the vehicle that need to be, that caused us to change the hardware. 6 was the first and the only one that I know which was in response to the technology change. The wireless technology change. We went from analog to digital, went to tri-mode, and then came the turn-by-turn and a few other things. With Gen 8 is we were able to do the slow and make a slowdown and a few other things that came after that.
So Sanjay, what's backwards compatibility mean for you? How long do you support it?
The hardware?
The service.
The life of the vehicle.
So that's the 10 to 15 year problem.
Absolutely.
Wow.
That is absolutely the case. And that's why I said that's our biggest challenge. Trying to work on consumer-facing technology in a vehicle situation where people don't, as I mentioned, this was the
where there's no keyboard or display.
Yeah, this was the one situation where we could not provide backward compatibility to all the vehicles that had Gen 5 and beyond. We could go from, if I remember correctly, from 4 and 5 to 6, but we couldn't go from Gen 3 to Gen 6. And all the Gen 3 vehicles, unfortunately, they were given an option to upgrade in some situations. I don't remember all the details, but that was, and we had a lot of unhappy customers. Actually, I believe there was a lawsuit also. So, but that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that the safety and security services for OnStar are really available throughout the life of the vehicle.
The guy from Best Buy wants to know if you've considered entertainment as a direction.
Hold that question. If it doesn't get answered, I will expound on that. One of the things that I wanted to highlight there was, with all of this going on, by the way, I didn't even talk about the server functionality. This is where all the various applications on the back end have changed over time. We went from a VB-based application to a Java application to adding all the features, and eventually the China launch, which obviously meant international application, and the other things that came afterward. And scaling. So we went from, I think this was about 100,000 customers to 5.5 million customers. And at the same time, we try to keep it simple. So it's a 3-button system. That's all there is in the vehicle.
Have you thought about a portable version of this that would not be restricted to GM vehicles?
We have. The challenge is the vehicle integration. The integration in the vehicle is not open. So every manufacturer has its own way. I think we touched on that while before the conversation, that every vehicle actually has a local area network, sometimes more than one local area network in the vehicle itself, which is all the devices talking to each other. So being able to know, what the commands are, when there's a crash, where to get what information, when the OnStar unit will pick up that information, that piece is all very specific to the manufacturer. So you lose that. So if you were to ever go that route, you lose a lot of that functionality.
So Sanjay, is the vehicle integration something done in the factory or at the dealer?
This is all in the factory. So Gen 1 was the dealer installed. Gen 2 onwards, always been factory installed.
So does that mean the dealer, so you either put OnStar in every GM vehicle, and if somebody wants OnStar, they get the right mirror, and then they're ready to go? Or because going back to your SUV picture, there were a lot of different components.
Right.
So does nearly every GM vehicle have most of the components in it?
Nearly every GM vehicle has all the components in it. Yes. The only time where there is no OnStar is when actually it's, again, fleet or rental or something where it's an exclusion.
Right.
It's not inclusion. It's not requested for factory install. It actually is excluded from factory install. Lease vehicles potentially here.
Looking at this chart, I was thinking about what you said earlier about how it started with GM and Hughes and EDS. And over time, I think that GM and EDS have not been as tight as they were, and I don't know, where GM is with Hughes. And also, I don't even know if the analog stuff even exists in a lot of the carriers' towers anymore.
No.
So how have you dealt over time, once you had this innovative thing that you built with partners, with the fact that some of the partners in technology might be pulled out from under you or disappear, and how can you continue to support that sort of a structure?
Well, it started with the 3 partners. And at that time, actually, the interesting thing was, even though we mentioned 3 companies, they were all really owned by General Motors. EDS was owned by General Motors. Hughes was owned by General Motors at that time. So it really was General Motors. But it started with 3 components, if you can call it, of General Motors. But it is a new entity. So everything that's coming, so even though everybody pulled in and put their resources in, people and money and all that came into the company, but then it since then has been its own company. So OnStar is its own company, has its own core competencies, has its own people, and has since been able to take it from that point onwards. So as that, they brought in their resources and know-how, but from that point onwards, it really has been its own company that's been doing that. So yeah, EDS was spun off, Hughes was spun off afterwards. But OnStar has been able to take the technologies together and continue to mature.
So you mentioned at the very beginning you were offering on Lexus and Audi and Subaru. Mm-hmm. So what happened? Is there a competing offering? Did they do their own, or did they just stop using OnStar?
Some of them stopped using it. Some of them are coming out with their competing offerings. I don't have all the details on all their strategy and plans. But there have been, yeah. Actually, we still have, I believe, some Lexus customers that we still take calls from. Small number, because all the vehicles are somewhere this year. But we do have that.
Question. Has there been privacy concern on the sides of customers?
Privacy has been something that we've taken very seriously. Yes, there have always been privacy concerns. There's always been situations where I think there are concerns about the Big Brother watching kind of situation. Mm-hmm. Then I touched on the stolen vehicle slowdown. That was what triggered a lot of the discussions in the blogs and everything, where there was a lot of talk about, if the vehicle can be slowed down at any time, that means somebody is watching at all times. And in an earlier discussion, we actually talked about being able to track teenagers and all. A lot of parents have asked for that, but we've stayed away from that just because of privacy concerns. However, having said that, a lot of those things are changing. I think a lot of people are getting more and more open to the idea of getting their position being available, whether it's the Facebooks and the Goalas and Foursquares that are changing that, but people are getting more and more open to that. So I think over time, some of that acceptance will occur. But there certainly are privacy concerns, and we have been very, very careful about all this, yes.
Yeah, so I just checked on Wikipedia. There are apparently 245 million vehicles in the United States. So it seems like a huge market opportunity if you could do some aftermarket kit that, I mean, there's a tremendous value proposition here, and you've got this huge potential base if there's a way to get maybe an OnStar Lite out there in the marketplace. I mean, I'd pay for the teenager tracking.
After the meeting, I'll take your name, and that way we can talk about the next when we do have that. I'll give you a call.
You want the return home feature, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of regulatory pressures that are coming too, and that's, I think, some of those things will kick in. For example, in Brazil, I think as part of the stolen vehicle, they do require some of the situations where I think you have to be able to provide geolocations and geofencing. So there's stuff that's coming down that will change between the acceptance of being able to share information and the requirements that are coming down the pike. I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the services coming.
How do you find your clients ranking in terms of reason for purchase? And second question is, what are you finding your percentage of client retention because of OnStar?
You're talking about GM vehicles then?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if we do any study on retention because of OnStar that I know of. Reasons for purchase studies have been done. I don't know if we shared that. That's the only thing I'm thinking. All I can say is that it is not popping up as the highest reason. A lot of it depends. When I say highest, it's not in the top 3 in most situations. It is soon after that. Actually, if I remember correctly, I'll share it. If I remember correctly, I think it's in the top 10 reasons for purchase for most vehicles. And also, what we are finding out all depends on who is the primary purchaser. For women, we find that it's a higher reason for purchase versus men. So a lot of other demographics at play that come in. And again, if somebody's buying it for their children, there's another higher reason for purchase versus if somebody's buying for himself or herself. So there's a whole lot of things that do come in play.
So GM must find it to be a good deal, though, overall, because they're continuing with the program. I mean, it's got to be a win-win situation for you.
Absolutely.
So same question, but at a different level. When people, 2 questions. Number 1, how much do you charge people a month for OnStar?
$199
So
a year.
$199 a year. So there's 20 or 30 things that OnStar provides today, and you're thinking of more things in the future. When someone decides to buy that at $199 a year, do you have a feel for which are the reasons that they're buying OnStar? Because there's a whole set of stuff that's tied in with vehicle integration that I think you own that market because you own the vehicle. There's a whole set of things that you're doing that are competing with Garmin and GPS devices and reservation devices in the future, or other information that's being brought in to the vehicle that'll be harder to do and maybe more costly to provide because it requires people and call centers to be able to do that. Right. And earlier you said your focus is to create a profitable business. So how do you think about the sort of the intersection of the high value things that people are buying and the low cost things that you're providing that maximizes your profit? So vehicle, the directional stuff, for example, would seem to me that that wouldn't be the reason anyone would buy OnStar at $200 a year. They might buy Garmin at $100 forever. But the stuff that is more central to theft of vehicle and locking your keys in are things that are, I think, easier for you to provide and probably a bigger driver of why people would purchase OnStar. Have you looked at? I mean, it's a question of any software company, right? It's which are the features that are features, which are the features that are drivers.
Yeah, there have been lots of studies that have been done. We can probably spend the next hour talking about a lot of them. And a lot of those comes back to, again, as the demographics. Different people, different age groups, different genders value the service differently. And then you throw in the perspective of who uses how much. And then, the safety, calling, for example. Some people use calling a lot, personal calling and the hands-free calling. Other people do navigation a lot, so they find value there. So it's all over the map, and that's why sometimes it's better to give a broader set of services, even though some might be low cost, higher value, or higher revenue, versus another one might be higher cost, lower revenue, because the fact that you spread it out and then you get higher.
Sanjay, I think what the audience is telling you is that there may be some value in segmenting your marketplace or analyzing the opportunity because right now they don't have choice. They just get the one.
Great point. We do have two, and I didn't mention that. There's the safety and security is the base package, which is the $200 package, $199, and then there is the $299, which includes navigation and a lot of the other services. But you're right, there is certainly an opportunity for further segmentation. There has been talk about per use charging. So let's say somebody wants to pay, and I think cell phone companies at one time did that, they do that still. If you want to just get, say, a package of 3, say, routes, or routes for only a month, what would that be charged for that? So those kind of...
The prom night package, right?
Now, teen tracking for the night of the prom. That's a good one.
Different question. How open is OnStar to technology from small companies? Because your comment about driving some business to the dealer, it just clicked when you asked that. I've been helping a company that's doing that for one of your European competitors. They can't do everything you said, but probably about 40 or 50% of what you're talking about, I know it's done today because a company I'm helping has it.
Love to talk to them about. Yes, we are absolutely open to any partners, all partners working with folks. One of the slides I didn't show was, as part of the ecosystem, our partners. We have partners in pretty much every space. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Bill, this is turning into all kinds of arcane trivia about your business model. But then, have you also looked at kind of going back to the Kroger thing? You're driving past the Kroger store, and oh, by the way, your refrigerator, which is also software enabled and internet connected, is now telling you you're low on something. And oh, by the way, Kroger's got it on sale right now. You might want to pop in and pick it up. So clearly a far-fetched example, but there is an opportunity for various partner providers, if you go beyond the emergency services and the dealer network, to an interest list that any one particular customer who is driving one of your vehicles now, enabled vehicles, has. They have an interest list, and those businesses would, I think, love to have the opportunity to send specific messaging or time and geo-specific messaging.
What I'm hearing right now here is that there's a lot of interest in consumer-specific services which are driven by connectivity. Something I hadn't heard 3 years back. So that's where some of the shift is going on. So that's great to hear that, because again, we've thought about it, we looked at it. I think the technology is probably ready, but it was more the acceptance. People are not necessarily ready to say that, yep, I want my refrigerator to pass that information on, so you can then send me a discount or a pop or a message to say, hey, why don't you stop at Kroger? There was just not that acceptance at one time. So it's great to hear that there is an acceptance now.
The flip side of the privacy, if you like, identity-based services, rather the services being bound to the vehicle, it's associated with the driver. So there might be different type of services depending on the driver, husband, wife, or the person driving a completely different vehicle, a rented vehicle, and getting the same services.
Now that's a great one, the first one you mentioned. We did talk about the ability to transfer identity and personality from one vehicle to another vehicle. The challenge sometimes becomes integration of systems on the back end and a whole lot of other things. Technology, I think, is ready. It's more the business models that sometimes come in the way. But the other one, that's an interesting one, being able to say, package a service offering for one versus the other, and then that stays. No, I don't know if we have looked at that, but that's a good point. The forces of change. This is where we are headed, right? Now, all the things we've talked about really are driving to this side, the need to continuously reinvent and innovate. And that's really what I think the message we're getting across the board. These are all the changes, and again, maybe not all, but certainly some of the key changes that are going on. Technology is changing. Absolutely, you know, the mobile technology is changing. Tools are coming in, more software, more location awareness, context awareness coming in. Wireless technology is changing. We're going from 3G to 4G and wherever else that leads from there. In-vehicle technologies are changing significantly as far as we can see. So there's a lot of technology changes that are going on. A lot of changes in the society. The consumer preferences with especially the millennial generation coming in, the acceptance of texting, as we talked about, the acceptance of being able to share location, which was unthinkable about 10 years back. That's happening now. And then, of course, there's a lot of regulatory changes. I found out, I didn't realize that it was just last week that Massachusetts passed the no texting law on Joanne told me, you know, earlier before this presentation. And that's a big change. Now, what does that mean? You know, with that regulatory change, along with the fact that consumers are not going to stop texting. You know, it's not like just because you say stop doing something, I'm going to stop. And it's like almost
revolution again.
it's not, you know, it will probably be the days of the prohibition, right? You're prohibiting somebody to text. It'll happen under the seat. So there'll be more accidents that'll occur. So what we are looking at is all these things as they are happening, there is a need to continuously use the technology to still provide safety, security, peace of mind. But at the same time, a lot of the services that we just talked about, discounts, texting, Facebook updates, you name it, all of those things in a safe manner. So provide connectivity in the vehicle and potentially outside, but in the vehicle so people can do things that they want to do, but in a safe way so we can keep certainly the occupants safe, but also more important, equally importantly, the outside people also safe, outside the vehicle. So this is where the focus is changing. This is actually a relaunch that happened in September of this year, last month. We are evolving OnStar from an automotive safety and security focus to a fully integrated telematics and infotainment platform to create what we call exceptional consumer experience. But the tagline or the big thing is to really provide safe connectivity for everything that needs to be done in the vehicle by people who need to do whatever, do it in a safe way. So we got the eNav side of things, or the navigation, the mobile application. We talked about the posting and texting, all of that, the audio Facebook potentially updates from the vehicle. Again, another navigation, being able to do diagnostics, safely be able to make sure that the vehicle is functioning, and always on piece of it, which means the traditional, the crash response, same accident prevention, maybe not prevention, but certainly response in case of an accident, part of it. So this is where we are headed in response to what we talked about, all the things that we've actually touched on here. Any thoughts? Mobile apps, as in the apps available on the mobile handsets, smartphones. So where we are heading potentially, and I can't announce anything here, but you'll probably see in the next X number of months, is actually the Volt application has already been announced. The idea of having a mobile app, an OnStar mobile app, and being able to do door unlock right from a mobile app. Do you check the status of the vehicle, track it even if you wanted to, of course, with all the caveats that has to be looked at. And in the case of Volt, see how it's charging, look at the charge, turn on, off, all that stuff right from your mobile.
Some months ago, I read an article, I think in New York Times, about multitasking. And it was basically, some studies came into a conclusion that people are really pretty bad in multitasking. Like even reading and comprehension of reading while you are listening to music is not good. And you're doing the right things. I mean, you are making it easy and safe to do all these things in the car. But are you concerned about this incapability of multitasking of the drivers? Because you give them a lot of stuff to do, and maybe they are not as good as we think in that.
Absolutely. I'm not denying the fact that there might be some human limitations to the number of tasks that can be done at the same time. However, what we are trying to do is whatever tasks people are doing anyway, if they can do those in a safe manner. And that goes back to the point of texting as a classic one, right? I mean, if you stop people from texting and they still continue to text and get into trouble in the process, instead of that, have a button and say, okay, I'm going to get my text that way, or have an option to say, do not text, so the recipient gets a message back, say, this person is in the vehicle, he's not accepting text. So there are ways to make it safe. So, but you're right. I mean, there's always a situation of are we hitting the number, and the kind of things we can do, and are we already past that and getting ourselves into trouble.
Hi, I'd like to see you leverage the technology that you've put into place now in a more external way. Your eNav system, for example. A scenario of a Friday night, I have to go pick up my husband at the airport. I leave my house, I'm immediately stuck in traffic on Route 90. My husband is a person who is allowed to see where I am, so he can look at his phone and track the car instead of us having to do 6 phone calls where I'm increasingly irritated that he is increasingly impatient. He can just see where my car is on Route 90. I'm married to an Italian. I pick him up at the airport. We're on our way home. We reach the exit where we leave the highway. Our Chinese restaurant says, there they are, time to deliver. And by the time we get home, 10 minutes later, our Chinese order arrives at our door without my having to make any of those phone calls.
In so many ways. On an ex-ante basis, perhaps eHarmony would have prevented you from moving into this traumatically unsuited relationship, right? And perhaps like e-divorce could help you arrange an amazing, so you might find true happiness. But anyway, and there's nothing OnStar can't do, I tell you.
I'd love to talk to you after the session to actually create a use case scenario and pass it over to our group, because
But Sanjay, as you can see, this is a charismatic platform. People love this. There are so many it's pregnant with opportunities, and I think we're all very, very excited is that you actually have put up here that you're moving into infotainment and you're moving beyond the vehicle and moving into the human realm. I think it's very, very exciting. It has stock price implications.
And we're all shareholders of GM.
Yeah. But now what we're going to do is we're going to work.
Owner of GM right now.
Right.
Soon will be shareholder once we go.
So you're actually working for yourself this evening when we move to dinner, and we're going to answer your question. So.
I could probably skip that. We talked about all this. This is kind of the intent is to stay still. Lead in technology first, and we touched on that. I did want to touch on the innovation team, because that was something, certainly that's the focus of the lab here. What we've seen is there are 3 things, I guess, that contribute to innovation for us. Alignment, alignment with business vision and strategy, a disciplined process that allows within it an experimentation model. So what's often called fail frequently and fail fast, right? So ability to be able to fail and learn from that, and then of course collaboration. I can say for sure that we've done a great job here. The entire organization has always been aligned with our vision. There's an adjustment now. We are aligning with that and adjusting all the organizational strategies along with that. Where we are still working on improving is allowing people to take risks, fail, learn from that, and not really have them be scapegoats, if you want to call it that way. But effectively, the idea of really truly allowing experimentation as part of our daily culture. We have processes that do allow that, but it really has to be more of a cultural element. I love to see that, where I'm allowed to try something and well, actually I am, but everybody's allowed to try something and not have to worry about that they'll be penalized for that. And then, of course, collaboration. I think we are doing a great job on internal collaboration, where we are still experimenting and learning the external collaboration, setting up the appropriate external collaboration networks with the right groups, right organizations. Organizations probably further along, but certainly right groups, schools, consumer groups and all, and trying to learn and work with them in a collaborative manner. So these are the three elements that personally I've seen work. And in my role in IT, we've actually made it happen where we went from, in the technology group, we went from pretty much no innovation, I'd say, maybe limited innovation before I started in the job, to where we've been able to have pretty clear idea of alignment with the vision and really starting to do a lot more innovation through these three pillars that we've created. So I just wanted to share that as some of our components that have worked for us. And I think they are pretty extensible. They'll probably work in lots of organizations. And then finally, this is our new, I guess, line. Safely connecting you in ways you never thought possible. And let me run, to end this, I'll run the new commercial, if you want to call it. So I'll do the commercial pitch.
So you have the 2-ton mobile app.
The 2-ton mobile app, that's right.
We need directions to go to
Pear Blossom Highway?
It's just outside of Lancaster.
Sure, I can download directions for you now. We got it.
Thank you very much.
OnStar ready.
Call home.
Hi, Daddy.
I'm on my way.
Send to car and done. You have one safe destination. Dillon Beach. Would you like those directions now?
Yes, I would.
Go north on Route 1.
Check it out. I can see everything that's going on with the car. Here's the gas level. I can check on the oil. I can unlock it from anywhere.
I received a signal there was a crash.
Some guy just cut me off.
I'll get an ambulance to you right away.
Looks like our check engine light's on. Can you do a diagnostic check for us?
Everything's fine. Oh, but you've got a loose gas cap.
OnStar, safely connecting you in ways you never thought possible.
So for the folks who did say that they knew enough about the services, just a question. Did you learn anything?
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything, any ideas, any thoughts, anything that we should be working on? Actually, yeah, maybe that's
for dinner.
The dinner, okay. So what I need your help, and this would be I guess the dinner question. Which services would you like to see in OnStar? And then, of course, very parochially, how can IT in the organization continue to drive innovation at OnStar?
It's Sanjay. Can you talk about the profitability? Are you guys making money? Cash flow?
Yes.
Okay. And is it all coming from subscriptions, or are you also I guess everything you talked about was selling subscription or selling per use to consumers. But you're sitting on a ton of data with an amazing amount of information of interest to a wide array of stakeholders who would give you money for it. Is that on the table?
One of the discussions that we are having right now to figure out how we can get value out of the data. And not just value, again, not value in terms of monetary value, but it might be just value, societal value, because some of that data would be of value to various organizations, government organizations, and all. Also.
Just feedback on car speeds would tell you about traffic conditions, for example. Yeah.
So if we get at a third, if you were Sanjay at OnStar, what would you do next?
Hire Thornton May.
Oh, there goes your stock price, right into the tank, right into the tank. But let's give it up for Sanjay. That was just amazing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are new to the Olin Innovation Lab, what we do now is we adjourn for dinner over here, and we collaborate on these questions, and then at the end of dinner, over cocktails, over coffee and dessert, we will basically report back and add some value to our colleague who shared with us. So please join us for dinner. We're going to over here in the lovely lounge,